It's April 2023, and this year we're celebrating Apple II in the spirit of Marcintosh, since there is enough of us who can't get enough of retro computers. For my part, I've had this French Apple IIc for a while, but I recently got a Swedish one that we can compare it with, and there are some improvements that I'd like to try out. I thought I'd upgrade the ROM, as this has certain benefits, and I want to do something about the rather bad keyboard and also try out a portable screen. So the Apple II was released on the 24th of April 1984, and so it's an excellent candidate for Apple II. Happy 39th birthday this very week. Apple was really on fire in 1984 with the launch of the original Macintosh a few months earlier in January. So next year we have a very special 40-year anniversary both for Macintosh and Apple II. Well, this is me unboxing the Swedish Apple II that I got recently. No surprises there, or are there? The seller had packed this really well, actually, and that was a pleasant surprise. I'll remember this and save the packing material if I ever need to ship an Apple IIc. So these are the two Apple IIcs. As you can see, the French one to the left seems to have been retro-brighted. It does look as white as they came originally, which is unusual. The keyboards are quite different with the custom language keys, and while the French is AZERTY, the Swedish keyboard is QWERTY, as you can see. Actually, North American Apple IIcs had a different enter key, as you can see here. Was this a NTSC PAL difference? Was there some European standard taken into consideration here? My guess is that the European enter key was part of the attempt to make the keyboard as language neutral as possible. The vertical enter key was recognizable as such. Only the reset, escape, control and delete buttons have retained the word labels on these European versions. Looking at the back, the French seems to have a paper label and a serial number, while the Swedish one has more of a plastic label and doesn't seem to have a serial number printed on it. I wonder how they got the paper label through the RetroBrite. There is some slight fading of the print on the case here, which is indicative of RetroBrite, but the Apple logo must have been removed or well covered. I've seen logos that have faded because they've come in contact with the peroxide in the RetroBrite process. Both are in pretty good shape otherwise, although the Swedish one is significantly yellowed. I grew up with a Macintosh SE thinking that all computers were monochrome. Because I actually thought this, it is great now to be able to compute in color on a VIC-20 from 1980. But since I grew up with the Apple Macintosh, I really wanted to get my hands on an Apple II computer with color graphics. And I just love the way the IIc looks with the integrated 2¼ drive. I soon realized though that the Apple IIc is almost not color in Europe. This was pretty disappointing. The composite out on the back is color for the NTSC machines in North America, but not on the European PAL machines. It's still possible to get color out of these though, but I need an RF modulator that plugs into the video expansion port on the back, and these are not easy to come by these days. So until I do, or put together some modern replacement, I'm stuck in monochrome, not only on the Macintosh but also on the Apple IIc. So the first revision of Apple IIc shipped with the so-called 255 ROM, which was 16 kilobytes in size. In November 1985, the so-called ROM 0 was released, which doubled the size to 32 kilobytes with some additional capabilities. Most importantly, Unidisc support was added, meaning that you could connect a 3.5-inch Unidisc floppy drive to the computer. Javier Riviera, known as JavMaster, put out this nifty guide to the various disk drives and the Apple machines they work with. As you can see, the Apple IIc works with the 3.5-inch Unidrive with the upgraded ROM. This Apple 3.5-inch drive from my Macintosh Plus does plug in, but it won't work, of course, annoyingly. But this is how it would look with the Unidrive. And if we have a look at the back, of course, the Unidrive would use the same floppy connector as this one, and just connect to the floppy disk port in the back. I'm going to have to get hold of the Unidrive, although that seems pretty hard to get these days. But even without the Unidisk, upgrading the ROM does have some advantages, as we shall see if I manage. Two other ROM revisions were made in the late 80s, with the ROM 3 introducing memory expansion capabilities on the new motherboard, and the final ROM 4 that corrected some of the problems with ROM 3. There have also been custom ROMs made with additional functionalities, link in the description, the so-called ROM 4X, for example. Since my Apple IIc most likely do not have the memory expansion motherboards, I really only need ROM 0. I will, however, install the ROM 4 since it has it all, and who knows if I'll need the additional capabilities in the future. Let's make a check to confirm the original ROM version in these machines. We do this by running print peek parentheses 64447 parentheses in BASIC. I'm testing the French Apple IIc first here. Yes, as we can see, this is indeed the original ROM 255. Let's do the same for the Swedish IIc. Of course, to drop into BASIC, when you turn the computer on, you have to hit Control Reset. It drops into BASIC, and then again, print peek. And there we have it. It also has the original ROM. Unlike the original Apple II that was made to be easily opened and expanded, the Apple IIc isn't exactly easy to get into. There are 6 screws underneath, the 2 at the far back and 4 towards the front. The other 4 screws in the middle there are holding the disk drive in place. There's a tab in the middle in the front that needs to be released with some prying. This 80s plastic isn't nearly as brittle as the 90s Macintosh plastic, but you still want to be careful. Once the front is released, the back needs to come loose, also attached with plastic tabs. I really recommend using something plastic to pry with, as metal objects do leave dents in the plastic. The handle lifts out, and here it is, opened. The keyboard is slotted into a groove in the disk drive casing and is held in place by the cover, so it lifts right out. Here in the front is the ROM chip that we'll be replacing. Luckily, it's in a socket, so the swapping should be really easy. We also need to do some trace cutting and soldering, which shouldn't be too involved. Let's take out the power supply module and take a look at it. It's held on by 2 screws and slotted into a connector on the logic board. And this is how it looks inside. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to take out the disk drive also. This thing takes up most of the space inside. It's attached with ribbon cable to the logic board and with the 4 screws underneath. And with that, it lifts right out, and we can see how it's open underneath with the motor there and the exposed belt. Alps made these, and they seem to be pretty reliable. At some point, I guess I should open it up and give it some lubrication. So here's the logic board with all the chips now visible. There are some strange modifications already on the board, but from what I have been able to read on the internet, these seem to have been made already in the factory. There's a resistor on a bent up pin from a chip. and a neat little bodge wire from the crystal oscillator. Looking at these dates, they seem to all be from 1984, so this is a rather early computer, week 45. Week 2. Week 44. Week 51 seems to be the latest. It could have been made in early 1985 then, possibly. Right, let's open the ROM 4 that I bought on eBay. It came in this chip container, which protects the pins very well. I'm using this chip remover. I know it's really for the other type of rectangular chips in sockets, but it works well for these chips too, if they're not too long. And it's out. I'm going to store this inside the computer so that I or someone else can reverse this mod in the future. Here is the new one. This should be the right way around. Actually, the legs are a bit too far apart to fit nicely into the socket. I just need to press them all slightly inwards. There we go, now it does fit nicely. Now we need to do the board modifications. This W1 needs to be cut open, and this W2 needs to be soldered closed, and that will be it. I don't like making permanent modifications on old hardware, but this should be a rather minor cut in the middle of the W1 there. I should be using a scalpel. This small box knife is quite bulky for this. I make 2 cuts and try to remove the metal between the cuts there. Okay. This is enough. Let's test with the multimeter on continuity mode. Yes, that seems to have done the trick. W1 is now cut, but it can easily be soldered over in the future if I want to reverse the mod. I'm putting some flux paste across W2 to be able to bridge the 2 parts. The gap should be small enough to do it just with the solder. I'm putting some solder on the tip and I apply it across W2 without touching the chips there on the sides. Looks like we need some more. That looks bridged now. I'll scrub it with some isopropyl alcohol. This is the favorite chemical in retrocomputing, and I need to buy some more of this stuff soon. Let's check that it's bridged with continuity on the multimeter again. Yep, it beeps from far end to far end. On W1 there is still no continuity across, so all is good. I put a label on the old ROM 255 so I know that that's what it is in the future, and I'll store it in the container inside the computer. It seems to fit this way under the keyboard with the double-sided tape. It does obstruct the airflow somewhat by the vents, but I don't think that'll be a problem. Taking the keys off a keyboard to clean them is tedious but strangely satisfying, especially with the dirty keyboard. The keys on the Apple II here though are so flat. I don't think I've ever come across such flat keycaps before. So I take these off for 2 reasons. I want to clean them, but they're actually not that dirty. The main reason is to remove the rubber spill guard that is interfering with the key presses. It's a shame that I can't get across in a video just how bad this feels. We do seem to have two different colors of keys here, right? It seems to me that the number 2, D, K, delete, enter, left shift and spacebar and up key are slightly more yellow than the others. Now that the keycaps are off, we can finally remove this rubber spill guard that's on top, and yeah, you can see that it's like warped, not great. And there's another rubber mat underneath. It doesn't quite touch the plunges though, so I don't think this is a problem really. I think we'll keep this. Yeah, they have a nice feel to them. There are no Alps keys, but yeah, not bad still. Excellent, so I'll put this back and put the keeper caps back, but leave the rubber mat off, of course. Excellent. Now that the ROM mod has been made and the keyboard is back together, we can try peeking the ROM to see if we were successful. And wow, what a difference. This keyboard is no longer horrible to type on. It's actually quite nice and has a tactile feel to it now. Great. Yes, look at that. Number 4, it worked. Awesome. Apart from the Unidisc capabilities that I actually can't benefit from without that special disk drive, all subsequent ROMs to the original lets you run a diagnostic at any time by pressing Closed Apple, Open Apple, Control and Reset. This will cycle through some tests and tell you if the system is okay. With the original ROM, some patterns are just cycled indefinitely and no confirmation is ever given. Let's have a look at that on the French machine that still has the original ROM. But right now it's cycling through some tests and we see some garbled patterns that stay and blink, and then it says system okay. So yeah, that's quite good actually to be able to check that. And here's the French machine with the original ROM, and if we try the same thing, Open Apple, Closed Apple, Control and Reset. On the original ROM, it seems to be Open Apple, Closed Apple, Shift, Control, Reset. And you see the patterns actually look kind of nicer. There's a ticking sound, but nothing ever happens. This just cycles like this indefinitely, and it's not really a test. This portable DVD player has featured in another video with my Commodore 64, but I thought it would be cool to see it with the Apple IIc. And the video in-out is just a 3.5 headphone jack style, and I had one of these connectors from an old digital camera. This is just composite and the 3.5 headphone jack style. The power is the common 12 volt center positive, and so I managed to find one of these simple adapters in a second-hand shop. With the carry handle, the Apple II did sell as a portable system, and this flat display was released as an accessory to the Apple II, and it was Apple's first LCD screen. But it was expensive at $600, and it wasn't backlit, and it had a strange aspect ratio, so demand was low, and it was discontinued pretty quickly. There aren't too many still around. JavMaster has made a color conversion of one that looks great. See the link in the description. Because of the power limitations I mentioned, we will have to make do with black and white. Let's connect up this screen and load this French introduction to the Apple IIc to see it in action on the small screen. Say we have the screen set up and we see the tiny text there on the screen. And restart the computer. Let's see if it loads anything. A moment there in French. Ah, look at this. I find this animation on the Apple II very impressive. We see an introduction to the keyboard there coming down the screen in an animated style, and Apple presents, and then there's a little drawing of an apple and the old Apple logo there coming up. I find this very impressive on an Apple II, this kind of animations. And yeah, the screen works. It's not great, as we've seen before. It's a tiny screen and with an odd ratio, but yeah, we can change the ratio actually, but then it gets even tinier. Let's just have a look at that. I'm going to change it from 16:9 to 4:3. You see, this is really tiny. I think it's actually better this way around. Right, it works. Well, I'm stoked to have this Apple IIc, and I'm looking forward to getting to know it better in the future. I have an image writer too that actually matches the Snow White design language of the Apple IIc, and if I manage to get hold of or make a serial cable, I hope to pair the two in a future video. Getting a floppy emulator would also make life a lot easier with this machine. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, do hit that like button, and if you'd like more retro computing coming your way, do consider subscribing to the channel. And thank you for watching. Bye.